Hey, this is Hans from Progressive Music, and this is video number 4 about the envelopes index. Um, the envelopes are actually pretty important when creating sounds. Envelopes are a bit different than the normal envelopes that you know, and of course, each envelope has sort of an attack phase, a decay phase, sustain, and release phase. But the difference between a DX7 kind of envelope and a normal envelope is that the ADSR is set levels and so on. And here you have actually this these buttons, and you can change not only the time but also the height. So that means that you can change the level. And these envelopes here, they're small, but they're very handy. If you use your shift key, you can actually drag to change what part you can see. And if you go over it, you can actually see that you see both the level up to 5 volts and you see the time. So that means if you set this up, you'll get something like 3 seconds in time for the attack phase. So I've got something like this. So that's a bit different from just the normal sine wave. Um, so you've got this multi-stage envelopes, and so that means that if I, for instance, want sort of a standard kind of envelope, I would actually have to, with a longer decay phase and so on, I would have to take these kind of dots down, and I can actually drag them to the side, and you see that it moves over. So now I've got something like I've got a time 4 and a level 4, and that actually creates the overall sound. So I'm looking at this. So that means if I click my sound or click my key and I keep it pressed, I finally end up in my sustain phase as it would normally do with a standard ADSR. But this is the part of my sustain. So if I take this to 0, then it will go back to the bottom and it will die out. If I take this up a notch, it's going to remain at that sustain phase. And if I let go of it, it's going into my release phase, and that's the part where I end up here. So if I shift over, pressing my shift key, I can actually take my release phase, and I can actually go up to 90 seconds for each of those parts, if that's hopefully enough. So something like this, if I let it go, is going to keep sounding for 16 seconds in this case. But since you use it in that way, also when you use a modulator, and you can set that same kind of thing for modulators, it's actually going to evolve the other sound as well, because that's evolving the frequency spectrum. So if I switch this on, normally I have this, because and this one dies out because it doesn't have the same release phase as the carrier has. But I could, for instance, take this to the left, something like this. Let's first of all do it like this, just the attack. So now if I press my key, the modulator, operator number 2, is going to affect the frequency spectrum for the number 1. And the spectrum for number 1, or the volume, is actually decided by whatever you do here. So if I dial this back, if I take this out, for instance, out of the equation first, and take the release shorter, and maybe a shorter decay, so something like this. Something like this. This can be long, but it's still only affecting the part that you hear from that first one, from that first operator. So if I take my attack phase shorter, something like this. And I could also do stuff like this, where I have sort of a rounded scape and shift through it. But actually this will not be heard, this part, unless I change my decay and my sustain time for my number 1 operator. So let's take this sustain back and take this lower. So something like this. And obviously the attack and all that kind of stuff really changes, or the way in how this modulator is going to affect the operator. So if I take this back and I take my my attack all the way back, so it has nearly no attack and it's going into the decay phase, again you get this sort of a plucked kind of something like this. Or maybe I take this lower in volume and I'll take it up to my decay phase. So something like that. So you can really change how that affects it. And if I take one of the other algorithms, so I'll take this one where I have 3 of those operators stacked together in series. So I have the number 2 operator, which has the same frequency. But now let's switch number 3 on and take a higher frequency. And well, let's see if I can dial it in later. So maybe not as much anyway. And maybe let it not start at 0, but, or sorry, not start at a higher value, but something like this. Now this will, the higher frequencies will come in later. And actually you see these horizontal line, that is actually a delay built in. So you can actually set a delay for each of those envelope to start at a later point. So there's a whole lot of things that you can do with that. So in FM synthesis, envelopes do not just control the volumes. They control how your timbre, how your sound evolves. And especially if you have more of those operators in series affecting all of them together, you get that special kind of DX and more evolving kind of sounds that you might have. So just to, for argument's sake, let's see if I have something in here. I've got something that uses a combination, so let's take this. I'm just keeping my chord pressed, and you hear all of this evolving sound coming up. So that's envelopes for you. I hope that is that was easy to follow as well, and you really have to try that out, of course. And the concepts work the same for all kinds of FM synthesizers. So I'll see you back in the next one. Cheers for now. Bye bye.